Welcome into the Paul Farrington Show. Paul, joined by Robert Ziggy Ziegler, back home in California for an NFL wildcard round preview episode. Ziggy, if you had told me back in September, back in August, I'm thinking when J.J. McCarthy went down with the knee injury, I'm in the airport filming selfie-style videos, about to get on a plane, devastated that our rookie quarterback's out. If you had told me that Sam Darnold would be leading a 14-3 Vikings team into a wild card game, I would have had so many questions for so many different reasons. But here we are, and the Vikings are going to be playing the Rams on Monday Night Football. Packers going to the Eagles. We got the Commanders at the Bucks. On the AFC side, the Chargers and Texans, Steelers, Ravens, and Broncos, Bills. A lot of really fun matchups. Part of that Steelers dropping to the 6th seed, a little bit of the intrigue there. I'm sure the NFL was throwing up some fist pumps when the Steelers-Ravens was the matchup, as opposed to the Steelers going to the Texans. Now you have one of the best rivalries in the NFL alongside the billing of Herbert versus Stroud, two of the premier quarterbacks in the league. The NFL marketing team must be thrilled with that. So we got a lot to talk about here. If you guys are enjoying these videos, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. You can become a member by going over to our community homepage. To our channel homepage and selecting join. We have the winner of our Pick'em League, actually, Ziggy. Hold on, let me get this real quick. I forgot about that. We have the winner of our Pick'em League. So this entire season, we've been doing the Pick'em Challenge, the Pigskin Pick'em. You're picking games, not against the spread, just straight up. And let me see. Hold on, let me go to my brackets, see if I could pull this up here. I came in third place, unfortunately. I was really hoping that we could avoid giving away the gift basket if I was able to bring
I was
home.
Rooting against you.
I think everyone was rooting against me. All right, so in the Paul Farrington Show Pick'em bracket, we had in first place Pack Fans Pick 1. Steve Squires held on to the lead this week. He had the lead last week, 1970 points for winning. Steve, reach out to us on our Instagram or on email, paulfarringtonshow@gmail.com, or hit us up in the Instagram DM section. We'll get back to you with your grand prize. And since you're a Packer fan, I think you're really going to like the prize because I've been anticipating a Packer fan would win and collecting different various items that Packers fans would enjoy. So congratulations to Steve. Thank you to everyone who played. We had a lot of people participating in this. I think we were a little bit over 100 at 102 on the season. So appreciate everyone for playing. That was a lot of fun. And, maybe we'll run it back next year with some even better prizes. So again, if you're enjoying this, you can check us out on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and you can also listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So let's get into the games here. We're going to start with the big one for this channel, the Packers and the Eagles. Sunday at 4:30. Jordan Love, little injured. Jalen Hurts coming out of concussion protocol. It's a rematch of week 1 from the season, 34-29. The Eagles won that game back in Brazil. Everybody remembers, especially on this channel, an amazing game back and forth. Saquon Barkley's debut in Philly. Jordan Love and the Packers trying to show that they were the same team that went to the divisional round last year and were ready to take things up a level. We haven't really seen that exactly this year, but in that game, some fireworks. And ultimately, the thing that I take away is the Jordan Love injury at the end of the game and my reaction landing on a plane in Wisconsin thinking, oh my God, their season's over, week 1. And of course, because of the Packers, they wound up being okay. And Jordan Love, thankfully, was fine for the season. So Ziggy, a lot has changed from week 1, though. A lot has changed. And in some ways, a lot hasn't. The Eagles, who were introducing Saquon Barkley in that game, have just been dominant on the ground this season. Saquon has 2,005 yards on the season. He was close to breaking the Eric Dickerson record, decided to sit out. But the Eagles, 179 rushing yards per game. That's the second most in the league. They dominate in time of possession. They led the NFL once again. Jalen Hurts has been good on the ground. When you look at this Eagles-Packers matchup, does it all start with Green Bay being able to slow down this Philadelphia rushing attack?
How could it not? I mean, Jalen Hurts is obviously an important player for this game, but he's coming off concussion protocol. It'll be a few weeks. I'm just going to assume he's playing. If he's not playing, this game takes on
everything changes.
Coming out there playing, it's a totally different matchup. I have a hard time seeing him being concussion protocol for 3 weeks. He's going to play this game, but he'll be coming off. He'll be rusty. He's been up or down. Saquon Barkley has not been up or down this season for the Eagles. His last game under 100 yards was the Cowboys, November 10th. I'm not counting that Steelers game. He easily could have had 100, but just didn't because it was a blowout. Saquon's been lights out for them, right? He's gone over 200 yards in a game. He's gone over 150 5 or 6 times this season. He's been a monster for them. Now, I think the Packers actually have a chance of shutting him down. I think if you're sitting back and thinking, what chance do the Packers have against Saquon Barkley? You just have to look at the game plan against the Lions on December 5th. Yep. I know the Packers lost that game, but they held Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery combined 29 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown. If you can hold Saquon Barkley to under a century, things start to look very, very different for this game. And I don't care if Dan Campbell is coming out. Things are leaking out about what he was saying. We got some stuff on the mic. He thinks that the Packers are going to lose against the Eagles next week. I'm not buying that. I think this Packers team is a real shot, even with all the injuries.
Yeah, the injuries are a concern. And you talk about stopping the run. That's difficult enough against Philly. But Jalen Hurts this year, he actually is, despite all the controversies, Jalen Hurts is actually having an okay year passing the football. I think he has the highest passer rating of his career. Again, AJ Brown missed some time. Devontae Smith has missed some time. When all of them are playing, this Eagles offense is clearly, and it should be, it's very different. And part of the concern I have for the Packers is even if you are able to slow down Saquon Barkley, which is probably not slow down, more of a let him get his, you contain him. You're missing Jair Alexander, who's been so good when he's played. I didn't realize they're 6-1 with Jair playing and 5-5 with him out on the year. And you remove him. People underrate AJ Brown so much. Like this dude is right up there with the elite receivers in the league. I'm serious. Like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, like AJ Brown's in that conversation, and I don't think a lot of people put him there. It's gonna be a tall task for this Packer defense to get some stops. And if I were a Packer fan, I'd be really worried about that. And you saw that in week 1. Going back to, they had their opportunity early in the game. There was the interception from Hurts, and then I believe the Eagles fumbled the snap. And Green Bay walked away with 2 field goals. They weren't able to get touchdowns on the board. And the Eagle offense had a moment where they just became unstoppable. And they had some big drives. I'm trying to remember the one that ended the game. I have it here. I brought this up when we were talking with Bass yesterday. They had the 16-play, 67-yard drive that ate up 7:25 to basically run out the clock and win the game. Like, the Eagle offense can do that to you. So I think Packer fans should be very concerned about the injuries on defense, particularly to Jair, and whether or not they're going to be able to slow down Hurts. That's another question, though, is how healthy is Jalen Hurts going to be?
Yeah, I will say this for the Packers. If Jalen Hurts is on, if he's playing a great game, if he's playing the best football he can, the Packers are not going to win.
Yeah.
It's that simple. If Jalen Hurts is lights out, you could do what you want against Saquon Barkley, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, both on the ground and in the air, a decent defense. Jalen Hurts at 100% will outplay, I think, the version of Jordan Love we're going to get next week. But as he said, right, that all the offensive starters sat out last week. Jalen Hurts hasn't played football. It'll have been at least 3 weeks since he's played football by the time he shows up for this game. He has not. There's real reason to believe, I think, that this Eagles offense could come out looking a little bit rusty. And the biggest problem the Packers have had all season in these big games is getting off to a slow start. Second half, they've generally played pretty well. They've scored a lot of points on offense. The defense has gotten some big stops. They've been able to handle that once the game gets going. The possibility of a slow start for the Eagles, I think, means the Packers, even with Christian Watson out, even with Jordan Love likely not 100%, though I think the nerve damage will probably be pretty minimal and he'll be playing close to. This isn't like that lingering groin injury that stuck with him for so many weeks earlier in the season. The fact that the Eagles might have a slow start, I think, pushes an advantage towards Green Bay that they can really take advantage of.
Well, they're going to have to. They're going to have to. You can look at the first game of the year with all those opportunities in the red zone that they weren't able to convert into touchdowns. I think it's going to come down for Green Bay to one of those games where you just need to win we talked about again with Bass, the 6 to 7 plays that are swing plays in the game. And that's going to come down to Green Bay forcing a couple turnovers, converting some big third downs, getting stops on some big third downs, Maybe you throw in stopping the sneak if Hurts is in there. So I look at this game broadly thinking Philly should probably win. Just with the way Green Bay's trending right now in Philadelphia, difficult place to play. If the Eagles are able to get their guys back healthy, I expect Philly to win. But the Green Bay ceiling, I've said this all year long. This is where Packer fans are saying we're pandering to the Packer audience here. I think the Eagles are going to win. But I'm acknowledging that Green Bay, when they play their best football, is just as good as Philly. Like, they can hang with Philadelphia. And I don't think you could really say the same where if both teams show up and play their best, it's going to be a game. If both teams show up, and Commanders, Eagles, I think the Eagles will still win that game, assuming Jalen Hurts plays. So the Packers' ceiling is extremely high. A lot of it's going to come on Josh Jacobs, who's been so good this entire season. He's kind of become the heartbeat of this Packer offense, where we talk about Jordan Love and the 4 receivers with Christian Watson. Now it's 3. But Josh Jacobs has been sort of a revelation. I mean, he's always been great, but this year particularly, he just feels like he's taking it up another level in Green Bay. And I know he had a year where he led the league in rushing, but he's just been phenomenal. There's a challenge here because you're going against the Philly defense that is number 1 in total yards allowed, number 2 in points scored allowed, number 1 in pass defense after being 31st in the league last year. Like, this Eagles defense has taken arguably one of the biggest leaps in all of football from where they were last year with Vic Fangio. So not only do you have the challenge of Philly on the offensive side of the ball, you also got to be able to score against them. It's a difficult game for Green Bay here.
Yeah, but as you say, the Eagles are right at the top there for all sorts of defensive stats, but they're 10th in opponent rushing yards per game. Now, you don't look at that and say, oh, right, this is a huge vulnerability we can exploit, but it's something.
But you take
Josh Jacobs, and Josh Jacobs has shown throughout this season he has the potential to run on anybody. The Packers have faced some good rushing defenses throughout the season. And when his number's been called, he's been able to step up. Not only has he generated a lot of yards, he has 1,300 yards in the season. He's got 15 touchdowns, especially if you look at the tear since the Bears game in November 17th. He's scored a touchdown in every single game. And indeed, multiple of those games, he's had 3 touchdowns. This is a guy who can score big time. And the Packers are going to need that out of him. So look, I mean, the Eagles are favored, and they're favored for a reason. But it's the NFL playoffs. Anything can happen. And when I look at the Packers, they've got an excellent run defense. This is not the defense that we've seen in previous years. I know Packers fans are upset about some of the halfway play calls against the Bears, and fair enough. But you can't let that overshadow the fact that this Packers defense has been a strength of the team for the year this year instead of the kryptonite it was last year. I can see the world in which the Packers are able to go into Philadelphia and beat the Eagles. And honestly, if you look at the teams in the NFC playoff picture, there's not a lot of teams I feel like I could say that for. Obviously, you can say that about the Lions. I think the Vikings would have a chance. But otherwise, I've got the Packers at number 3 on my list of teams that have a potential to go into Philadelphia and win a game.
I might even feel better
ahead of the Vikings after what we saw.
Yeah, I might even feel better about the Packers than the Vikings going in on the road to Philly. I think I'd feel better, weirdly enough, about the Vikings hosting the Eagles than I would the Packers. But in terms of going on the road, outdoor environment, the Packers have, in some ways, have transitioned to a ground and pound team where I felt that with Jordan Love, coming into the year, I was like, oh, they're going to throw it all over the place. But they've thrown 15. I think Jordan Love has 15% fewer passes thrown this year than last year. Like, Josh Jacobs has been that good. You just got to give him the rock. And that's what's like. It's going to come down to, are the Packers going to win at the lines? If you can run, and now you're forcing the Eagles rookies, Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, who've been great, by the way, into potentially some some single coverage situations. Maybe you could get Jayden Reed to burn him 1 or 2 times, and you open things up for Jordan Love a bit. And that's when the Packers become dangerous. Is if people are trying to bear down on Josh Jacobs, let Jordan Love get in his groove. Now all of a sudden, that's when it's a problem against the Packers. And they started to do that against Philly. And they started to do that against Minnesota, Detroit in the second half. Like, they have these moments this year where they do feel unstoppable, but it's been about consistency, and you really just haven't seen it throughout the entire season. And that's what a lot of Packers fans, I think, expected coming into this year was, hey, we did it over the final 10 games last year. They were just basically great for 10 straight games.
They were close to perfect.
They were close to perfect. And this year, it's been a little more up and down, trying to overcome some challenges, and injuries have been a part of that, but injuries are part of football. I mean, look at the Lions here. So I think it's going to come down to, Josh Jacobs establishing himself and then winning those big plays. Maybe it'll come down to the 2 big free agent acquisitions. Can Xavier McKinney get back to his ball hawking ways? Can Josh Jacobs assert himself on the ground? It's a tall task in Philly, but I don't think the Packers get blown out. I'd be shocked if they got blown out in this game.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you brought up Jayden Reed, because if you look at the biggest Packers games this year, Jayden Reed has been almost absent from them. And I think that's been a huge problem for them. Right. Obviously, everybody who plays fantasy knows about the Jayden Reed goose egg against the Lions. But against the Vikings a couple weeks ago, 1 reception for 6 yards. Against the Eagles, the beginning of the season, he had a great game, which helped keep them in them. But then you look at the early in the season, in these big games, they were able to get Jayden Reed involved, right? The early Lions game, the early Vikings game, the early Eagles game. But he's really struggled down the stretch. We talked about this on the show we did with Boss a little bit, right? Like when they've had to manufacture touches for him, when this offense hasn't gone organic, any Packers fan is going to feel PTSD when I say Jayden Reed jet sweep, right? Like those plays have been disastrous for them. They need to go into this game feeling cool, feeling confident, and just letting the offense play out organically. It's felt like when Matt LaFleur has done too much for them, when he's tried to come with all these fancy gadget plays and get Jordan Love doing crazy stuff, it's been a disaster. You've got weapons. You've got Josh Jacobs. You've got a quarterback that can play good football. You've got good wide receivers. Romeo Dobbs, I expect to play. Jayden Reed should play. One of Tucker Kraft or Bo Melton or Dontavian Wicks or whoever should be able to have a good game. Tucker Kraft, no one pays attention to him. Great player. But there's a lot that can be said about this team. The Packers, both their fans and more importantly, the team, just need to relax, be confident, recognize there's some stuff that's going well for you, and let your big players like Xavier McKinney, like Josh Jacobs, like Edgerrin Cooper, who's really emerged, even as the Packers.
I love watching Cooper. I say it on every show. I think Edgerrin Cooper's been awesome. Like what a way he's come on to end this season after returning from injury. It's fun to watch him. It sucks as a Viking fan seeing a Packer young linebacker. Like that's what you want in the draft when you take these guys. You just want a monster on the defensive side of the ball. And I feel like Edgerrin Cooper is just in on every single play when I'm watching the Packers play. He's a lot of fun. But yeah, we'll see how it goes here. The Jair injury really worries me. I have a feeling that Saquon will get his, but I just have a feeling that with Jair out, and we talked about, are people disrespecting Keyshawn Nixon? Are people disrespecting Carrington Valentine? Like maybe, but AJ Brown and Devontae Smith are the real deal. And if you let Hurts get in a rhythm, I think this Philly team just becomes a machine themselves. So I'm predicting an Eagles win, but like I said before, I think the Packers have every chance to go in there and get a huge win. And if the Packers beat the Eagles, let's talk about that for a second. If the Packers do win, I love the hypothetical games, then it's on. I think the Green Bay fan base is, I don't even know if I want to say cautiously optimistic. I think they're just pessimistic right now about their chances. If you beat Philly, what better way is there to make a statement to yourself as a team and to your fan base that we can go on a run here? Sure, you got to go into Detroit next, but you just hung with them a couple weeks ago. Like that's the sort of thing where you can propel this team who's not having the run they had last year. Part of the magical run for the Packers last year was that you had this Jordan Love emergence. They were winning games time and time again, and they were winning them going right into the playoffs. This time you've lost 2 in a row. You might even have a better team, but you don't have that momentum. You'll get a lot of momentum by beating the Eagles. You'll get a lot of momentum. So we'll see what happens. But that game will be 4:30 on Sunday, so that'll be a lot of fun to watch. The Monday night game between the Vikings and the Rams. It's absurd that we get 14 wins on the season, Ziggy, and our reward is playing a team that beat the Buffalo Bills a few weeks ago. Like we talked about how great the Bills have been this season. The Rams in that shootout, they won that game. The same Bills team that went and crushed the Lions, who just crushed us, lost to the Rams. So of course, naturally, the Vikings would get Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford in LA after they decided to sit all their starters and essentially forfeit the 3 seed to take the 4, allowing Tampa to jump them. They played earlier in the season. It was a 30-20 win for the Rams. Of course, everyone.
It was a nightmare.
It was a nightmare game. People talk about this safety and the face mask on Darnold, but look, we got beat that game. We were straight up beat. Stafford, I don't think he had thrown for like 2 touchdowns all year or something. He had 4 touchdowns, nearly 300 yards. They outgained us 386 to 276. That's the game Christian Darrisaw got hurt. It was just a nightmare game. Coming off a loss to the Lions for us. So I'm looking at this game here. Just my general thoughts are, I do think the Vikings are a better team, but the Rams do have this ability to lock in on offense. And when Stafford, Puka, Kyron, and Kupp are all rolling, I mean, I'm worried about that offense a lot. I think I'm assuming that Darnold will bounce back, but do you think my fears are valid that we might just not be able to stop them?
I'm not so sure. Everybody talks about the stars on the Rams offense, and there's a whole lot of them. But after that Bills game, right, you mentioned that as an incredible game for the Rams, and it was. Matthew Stafford went and did the impossible. He outdueled Josh Allen, having a career game. The offense has really struggled. 0 touchdowns against the 49ers. 100 Matthew Stafford passing yards against the Jets in a close win. Barely edging out the Cardinals. And now you're taking a week off. I think there's a real chance if the Rams offense looks like they have in the last 3 games the starters played rather than the Bills game. And let's not forget, right? That's coming off of like that Bills game was in between tough games against the Saints and the Eagles. Eagles blew them out. The Rams really struggled on offense against the Saints. Like if it weren't for Kyron Williams, they lose that game. I don't think the Rams offense is going to come out and be explosive. If you get the full all cylinders go Rams offense, obviously it's a problem. And the Vikings, the last time they played, really struggled to get pressure on Stafford, which is part of why I think you're probably worried about this game. We tried it. Brian Flores brought out every trick in the book and nothing mattered. But Stafford over the past weeks, he's been missing throws. He just hasn't been playing his best football. The run game hasn't been going. And now they're taking a week off. The Vikings are going to get a home crowd in Los Angeles, right? That's really the reward. You go to LA. There have been playoff games where in their own building, the Rams have had to go to silent count. It's happened against the Packers. It's happened against the 49ers. And even though the Vikings don't have that reputation, they've traveled extremely well this season. I was very happy with how they did early in the season up until that Seahawks game, whatever happened there. I think the Vikings are going to win this one, and I think they're going to win this one comfortably. I don't think it's going to be the same kind of environment and the same kind of catastrophe that we just saw against Detroit.
You know, and it could be that I'm looking at the Rams offense a little bit more of what they've been at times as opposed to who they've recently been. Where you're talking about, the 12 points against the Niners, 19 against the Jets, 13 against the Cardinals. Like that's not the team that hung 44 on Buffalo. That's the team that I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of the team that hung 30 on us. But we have to get to Stafford. We just have to get to him. The same way we really didn't get to Goff, or at least the Lions make us pay when we blitz. That's what I'm afraid of is Stafford just having one of those games. And it seems like when people play the Vikings, they often have one of those games, unfortunately. Like that's my fear. We're sending everyone, can't get home. Stafford's picking us apart, finding the holes. Like I can see it already happening, but based on recent play, hopefully that's not the case. When the Rams have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp since week 8, they're 8-3. Like this is a really good team. This is a really good team, but so are the Vikings, and you have to be confident in a 14-win team. You can't just say, hey, Sam sucked against the Lions. He's falling apart. Like I'm trying to find my holes of optimism.
Well, we're going to learn a lot about this Vikings team this game because Sam Darnold, there's 2 things I think that stand out about that Lions game. One was this was far and away his worst game of the season. Right? This wasn't Sam Darnold playing slightly below average. This is him completing 43% of his passes, missing wide open guys for touchdowns, making throws he's made all season. So there's that aspect. And the second is, that was the biggest game of Sam Darnold's entire career. It feels weird to say that about a regular season game, but Sam Darnold has not had a lot of opportunities to play in really big games. And that was a bona fide playoff atmosphere in Detroit. The fans were loud. Shout out to the Wolves for buying some tickets to get our fans into the game. They did our best. I'm glad some Vikings fans were there. But you saw that atmosphere. That was one of the craziest environments I've ever seen in Detroit. They showed up ready for that game. So the question is, did Sam Darnold just have an off game? Did he just play horrible football? Like happens to everybody sometimes. Every quarterback in the NFL has tough games. It's a tough position. Or was it the pressure in the environment that caused the trouble? If it was the pressure in the environment, we're in trouble. Even though it will be a lot easier of an environment against LA, it's a playoff game. It's officially win or go home. Next week is the biggest game of Sam Darnold's career, period. He hasn't ever played in a playoff.
No playoff games. Nope.
So this is it. This is his first time in the playoffs. Matthew Stafford has been there, done that a bunch of times. Stafford's not going to be phased one bit, whatever happens. If that was the problem for Darnold, we're in trouble. But if it was just an off game, like guys have, and it's easy to look at this, like you said, and say, yeah, it's Sam Darnold, he sucks. But he's played so well for so much of the season. The only other really bad game that stands out to me was that Jaguars game back in November. But otherwise, he's been lights out for most of the season. I think a bounce back could happen. I think this was just a bad game. I think Sam Darnold's going to be there. I'm not giving into the Vikings pessimism yet. If you want to see what it looks like, we're Vikings pessimists, you can check out our live show immediately after the Vikings-Lions game and just see us be crushed. I'm over that now. I got it all out of me. I think the Vikings can win this game, and they deserve to be favorites.
It's a prove-it game for Sam Darnold. If Sam goes out and flops, all the people talk about him getting $50 million, whatever the massive contract would be, that's all called into question. I think it's a big prove-it game for all the Vikings. You have a 14-win team here who's going on the road, and there's a lot of question marks about you. There probably shouldn't be as many question marks about the defense as there are. Detroit turned it on in the fourth quarter once I think we had lost all momentum, kind of lost all hope. It was just one of those nights. But look, Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel, both double-digit sacks on the season. Blake Cashman has been a monster addition. He's one of, 3 players in the league with 100 yards, 100 tackles, and 4 sacks on the year. Byron Murphy, first-time Pro Bowler. This Vikings defense has a lot of ballers. It is a very good unit. They need to look themselves in the mirror and slow down this Rams offense. They cannot get picked apart again. On the other side, though, you talk about the inexperience for the Vikings with Sam Darnold in his first playoff game. The Rams have rookies all over the place. Rookies on the offensive line, rookies in the secondary. They had Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, who have been Defensive Rookie of the Year candidates, but they're also rookies. A lot of, despite Stafford's experience and Kupp's experience, there are a lot of players on the Rams making their playoff debut too. In the first game they played, remember the big storyline was the Rams' offensive line? They held up, and the defensive line got after Darnold and made a couple big plays. The Vikings need to take advantage of the guys they're supposed to take advantage of. It sounds dumb, but a lot of times we don't do it in these big games. They need to dominate the lines, and if they do, they'll win the game. If they don't, we're probably going home. So that's to me the message to the Vikings. The boys up front, they have to win because they're supposed to. So it would be so deflating to lose this game.
And that's the thing that leaves me nervous in the back of my head is we called this, I think, after week 7 or week 8, right? What would be more deflating than the Vikings winning a bunch of games, barely missing out on the postseason because we're in a historically hard division, maybe the hardest division in the history of football, and then just getting killed on the road in the wild card round. It could happen. And again, I think you're right. With young guys, on the one hand, you get inexperience. On the other hand, you also get people that aren't intimidated. Sam Darnold, in some senses, in the worst of both worlds, where he's been around long enough to recognize how rare this is and how important this is, but hasn't actually done it before. If you're Byron Young, he's not as young as he used to be. But if you're Jared Verse, this is normal to you, right? Going to the playoffs, that's just what you do. It happens, whatever, man. I'm just playing football here. If you're Sam Darnold, this is your first opportunity in 7 years in the league to go into the playoffs and win. I think there's going to be a lot more pressure on this Vikings team. The Rams, people weren't expecting a lot from them. They sort of snuck into the playoffs. They're under everybody's radar. There's a huge delta in how much pressure is on Sam Darnold and the Vikings versus how much is on the Rams here. And that, combined with the history of the Minnesota Vikings, you don't want to talk about teams from the 90s when you're thinking about what's going to happen next week in 2025. Yeah. But, Paul, don't you just feel it? Don't you just feel like that might happen?
I think we're going to win. That, again, this is when it normally ends poorly, but I do think we're going to win. I think we're better than the Rams, but I can easily see the world where Stafford's unstoppable. Their linemen are having their way. They're getting to Sam. He's taking big sacks. Like, there needs to be changes to the Vikings offense, clearly. Like, there has to be some sort of implementation of avoiding these massive negative plays and getting Sam a quick read when the blitz comes. Like, that has been a problem all year. We have, like, O'Connell, and he's been great, but O'Connell needs to draw something up, because I'm going to be sick to my stomach if I'm watching Sam run all over the field with guys in his face and taking big sacks and everyone's locked up. Like, find the hole. Find the hole. That's pause. But yeah. All right. Let's move on to the Buccaneers and the Commanders. I believe that's the Sunday night football game this week, if I'm not mistaken. Let me confirm that. Yeah, Sunday night. Commanders at Bucks. That'll be a fun one. Our good friend Blake Bruchowski, big Commanders fan, is going to that game down in Tampa Bay. Maybe he'll be joined by our good buddy Weston Dell, who lives in Tampa Bay. So the Buccaneers, we've talked about them as a playoff dark horse. Baker had the best season of his career. I think probably the best passing season in Tampa Bay history outside of the Tom Brady years of recent. But he 41 touchdowns. He went for 4,500 yards. Mike Evans, of course, everyone saw the video, had the 1,000-yard season again. Like, I actually think plays like that, Ziggy, Todd Bowles calling Evans needs 6 more yards instead of just kneeing out the clock, taking a little bit of a risk and throwing a pass to Mike Evans, who I don't understand how the Saints didn't have 7 guys on Mike Evans to not allow him to get those 6 yards.
Well, it's because they know Mike Evans getting that catch cost the Bucs $3 million against the cap.
Maybe that's it. That could be it. maybe you never know. But Mike Evans gets the 6 yards. Essentially like carried off the field almost by his Buccaneers teammates, and the locker room was electric. Like, things like that, I do believe they matter, because that whole team, like, that moment, you could see the joy in all the Buccaneers players. It's a really cool moment to see. But you just want as much positive momentum as you can heading into the playoffs. I think a play like that kind of could spark something in a team. And again, Baker's been great. Bucky Irving's been awesome. But they're very injured in the secondary. They're probably going to be without Antoine Winfield and Jordan Whitehead. That's potential in the safeties. They could also be missing Jamal Dean. Like, they found ways to survive without them and get into this playoff spot. But Jayden Daniels has also been special this year. And Terry McLaurin has had a great year. He set the Commanders' single-season receiving touchdown record. So they played earlier in the year, and Tampa Bay had their way, but these are two very different teams. Which way are you leaning very, very early into the prediction phase?
Well, Paul, you missed the single most important matchup of this entire game.
Please.
You didn't even mention it.
Please.
Mike Evans versus Marshawn Lattimore.
Oh, yeah. I forgot. Yeah.
The Commanders saw this. They had the time stone from like whatever that Marvel movie is and saw the futures and realized they need to get Marshawn Lattimore to shut down Mike Evans.
I forgot about that.
If you look at career matchups versus him, I mean, this is the most exciting wide receiver cornerback matchup in the NFL. Mike Evans says he's grown past it. Marshawn Lattimore says he's grown past it. No, they haven't.
No.
I don't believe that for a second. They can only say that. And Mike Evans either goes nuclear against Marshawn Lattimore or has a horrific game. Just to give you a few of their most recent matchups. Mike Evans versus Marshawn Lattimore. 1 reception, 13 yards, 0 touchdowns. 7 receptions, 147 yards, a touchdown. 4 receptions, 86 yards. 0 receptions, 0 yards, 0 touchdowns. 1 reception, 2 yards, 1 touchdown. Like, Mike Evans is either going to have the game of his life or get absolutely locked. He never has a mediocre game in this matchup. And, Marshawn Lattimore coming back, I know we sort of fixate on that matchup, but the Commanders traded for him knowing that this could be a big improvement for their defense. When he's healthy and when he's playing well, he's lights out. He's a very, very good player. And the fact is, I like the Commanders going into this game. I talked about it a little bit in our Rams-Vikings preview. When you've got young guys they can sort of ignore the moment in some ways because they don't realize how big of a deal it is. I'm not saying they're idiots, right? It's the NFL playoffs. But again, you look at someone like Baker Mayfield, right? He's had a lot of opportunities and he's won a couple of games, but he's lost some really important games too. He knows these seasons don't come along super often. You're Jayden Daniels, right? You entered into the NFL. You cruise to what I assume is Offensive Rookie of the Year. You cruise to a Pro Bowl. You take a perennial loser franchise and they're immediately in the playoffs. Man, you're just having a good time.
It's kind of like
he's played great this season.
We talked about this 2 years ago when the Bengals went on their Super Bowl run. Remember that? We were talking, or was that 3 years ago now? Jeez, I think that was 3 years ago.
It was a while ago.
Yeah, we talked about Joe Burrow in his second season, how part of it for the Bengals was Jamar Chase was a rookie. Jeez, that was a long time ago. We released a reel, and it was one of the better performing reels I think we've ever had still, about how these young guys, they're just out there playing. Like, they're having fun. You really don't realize what you have. And the Bengals haven't been back to a Super Bowl since. They got to the AFC Championship game the following year, but it's not been the same. Like, it's hard to get to the playoffs to begin with, let alone go on a run. So I see what you're saying, where Jayden Daniels in Washington and Dan Quinn's having this magical year kind of popped up out of nowhere, other than a couple people predicting it. But at the same time, man, I just think that Tampa Bay is a little bit better and has the opportunity to exploit a really bad Washington run defense. They rank 30th in yards per carry allowed, 28th in rushing yards allowed. Bucky Irving has had a good season. It's in Tampa Bay. To me, this is a spot where Tampa's gonna be able to seize control and hold on to like a potentially 7 to 10 point win. Again, it'll be a lot of fun though, because you're talking about two of the better stories in the league. Baker coming back and doing it again, being even better, and then Jayden Daniels in Washington rising from the ashes. So I can't wait to watch it. I think it's an awesome matchup. Like, it's the NFC games are all great. They're all going to be a lot of fun. We talk another fun little fact here that I'm reading. There's only been 2 rookie quarterbacks to win a playoff game over the past decade, but it's been Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud. So we have seen some of these rookie quarterbacks who are, to be fair, having all-time rookie quarterback numbers, but have a little bit more success in the playoffs than they have in the past. Who do you have winning? A little early, but who do you have winning?
It's an interesting one. These are both incredibly effective red zone offenses. Like you said, there's reasons to be confident in both of these teams. I think this Bucks pass defense is a lot worse than the numbers show. Because if you look at the players that they've gotten to play over the past few weeks, they really struggle at passing defense early, right? We saw guys like Lamar and Kirk Cousins just carve them up. Uh-huh. You look at the guys they've gotten to play over the past few weeks, right? Like, you played Tommy DeVito, you played Aiden O'Connell, you played Cooper Rush, you played Spencer Rattler. Like, there's been a long stream of backups and mediocre quarterbacks that have come through and they've played. Credit to them. They played well against Herbert. They played okay against Bryce Young, which means something apparently these days. But I don't think this Buccaneers pass defense is great. I think there's a whole lot of injuries. Jayden Daniels is great against the blitz. And Todd Bowles is a blitz guy. He's a lot like Brian Flores in that way. If the blitz isn't working, if it's not getting to the quarterback, the defense doesn't function. Indeed, the only guy that blitzes more than Todd Bowles is, in fact, Brian Flores of the Minnesota Vikings. I think Jayden Daniels is going to be able to handle this game. He's shown a lot of maturity for a quarterback in the NFL. He's done a great job handling extra rushers, doing the stuff you expect veterans to do, right? Calling out offensive line stuff. And Cliff Kingsbury has, I think, had his best season as an offensive coordinator in his entire time in the NFL. I'm not scared of the rookie quarterback. I think the Commanders are going to be able to win a close one, but I'm taking the over, even at 50.5. I think we're going to see a shootout.
So you're going with the over as opposed to the the spread pick.
Well, no, I've got the Commanders winning, and I've got the over.
Okay. Gotcha.
No, I'll make a real prediction. I think the Commanders are going to win. You've got 2 top 5 red zone offenses in the NFL, but I hate to say it, and Bucs fans are going to get on me for this. I know it. I think Jayden Daniels can play as well as Baker Mayfield, and I trust the Commanders.
Oh no, I think you're right.
The Bucs defense.
I think you're right. Like Jayden Daniels, if you said, well, actually, it's interesting. If I said to you, Ziggy, who do you get? Who do you want, Jayden Daniels or Baker Mayfield in this game? Who are you taking?
I'm taking Jayden Daniels. The mobility, the poise under pressure. Baker has had huge ups but he's had huge downs too. I've loved what Jayden Daniels has done this season. I'm sure I'm falling victim, recency bias, big new thing, whatever. I think Jayden Daniels is hot.
No, I don't think it's crazy to say that at all.
Do you think he's hot?
I do.
Daniels?
I do. I do think Jayden Daniels is hot. The Commanders, look, 12-5. That's another crazy year. I talk about the Vikings at 14-3. Like 12-5 is another really good season. You don't get many years of 12 wins.
Yeah, Dan Quinn has gotten, I'm sure Kevin O'Connell's going to win Coach of the Year, fair enough. And basically any other year in NFL history, Dan Quinn wins it.
Wait, you don't think it'll be Campbell?
No, it's Kevin O'Connell's like minus 1,000 to win the award.
Yeah, I wonder. But I'm talking about like 12 wins. Listen to this. The Commanders had 10 wins in 2005. Okay? I'm just picking 2005. I could go back later. From 2005, wins by season for the Commanders. 5, 9, 8, 4, 6, 5, 10 in 2012. The Robert Griffin III year. 3, 4, 9, 8, 7, 7, 3, 7, 7, 8, 4. Like, this 12-win season, especially coming off a 4-13 year, it's special in Washington. And Tampa's a tough place to play, good team, but they are beatable. Like, I'm picking Tampa to win the game, but if Jayden Daniels has one of those nights like he did against the Bengals on Monday Night Football when the world kind of saw what he was capable of, yeah, the Commanders can, I don't know about beat like the Lions or the top teams, but they can hang around. All right, let's move on to the AFC here. We'll start off with the Broncos and the Bills. That's going to be at 1 o'clock on Sunday. You have Josh Allen just having an MVP caliber season. It's going to be him or Lamar. I think it's going to go to Josh Allen. Buffalo is the 2 seed at 13-4 with the win over the Chiefs. I guess these are the 2 teams that beat the Chiefs, but the only team that beat the Chiefs when everyone was playing. 42 total touchdowns for Josh. Joins Aaron Rodgers, the only players in NFL history with at least 40 touchdowns in 5 NFL seasons. 40 total touchdowns. The Bills, I think, were the first team ever to have 30 passing touchdowns and 30 rushing touchdowns in the same season. The offense has just been on fire. And that's going against the Denver defense, on the other hand, which set they led the league in sacks with 63. Vance Joseph's done a great job. That's the most in franchise history. Patrick Surtain's one of the best cornerbacks in the league. It's complete turnaround on defense for Denver. To me, though, and tell me if you agree with this, I think the Denver story is amazing. It's been great. Bo Nix having a great year. Sean Payton revitalizing this team after the Russell Wilson nightmare season. I just think that if Buffalo's going to get got, it'll be because of their defense. They're 2-3 against playoff teams this year. They've allowed 108 more yards per game against playoff teams than non-playoff teams. They're averaging 33 points allowed to playoff teams. Denver's offense is not good enough to outscore Buffalo. I don't think, as great as the defense has been, I don't anticipate them stopping Josh Allen. Maybe you could slow him down a little. I don't think there's enough on the offensive side for Denver to be the team that gets Buffalo.
Yeah, people talk about the Bills defense struggling, and there's some truth to that. But if you look at the teams they've actually struggled against, right? You look at the teams they've given up those huge scores to. The only teams they've given up 30 or more to are the Bills, the Rams, and the Ravens. That's it. So those are some of the best offenses in the NFL. And I'll say this, if I'm forecasting Buffalo forward, that might be a problem when you talk about winning the AFC or winning the Super Bowl. But there's not a lot of shame in struggling offensively against the Lions or against the Ravens, right? Sometimes that just happens when those offenses go supernova. The 2000 Ravens aren't stopping those teams. So if you look how the Bills have played against weaker offenses, they've actually played okay, right? They did a great job against the 49ers. It didn't cost them against the Dolphins or against the Chiefs or against the Seahawks. The Bills have been able, when it's an important game, against anything other than the best of the best offenses, to walk in. And if you ask me, who are the Broncos more like? Are they more like the Lions and the Ravens? Or are they more like the Chiefs and the Dolphins and the Seahawks? Sean Payton's done a great job. But I'm sorry, Bo Nix is not Jared Goff on the Lions. He's not Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And he's struggled on the road this year, right? He's 4-5. Some of his worst games have come on the road. And you're heading to play Buffalo in Buffalo. Josh Allen's ready for this. He's been in the playoffs so many times. He's so experienced. He's so fed up with losing. I think the Bills are going to murder the Broncos. I think 8.5 points might be too small.
It would be an utter catastrophe for the Bills to lose this game to Denver.
McDermott is getting fired if they lose this game.
It would be a nightmare if they lost this game. And I just can't see it happening unless if the Denver defense just has the game of its life, which I guess they're capable of, but I can't see it happening. And hey, kudos to Denver. It's a great season. But they played with the Chiefs. Like, the Broncos have had some really impressive games this year. In Buffalo, with everything that Buffalo has been working towards over the past few years, like, they understand the moment. And maybe this comes down to, if Denver does hang around, you're like, the Broncos, they're just kind of effing around, and the Bills have the weight of the world on their shoulders. Maybe that could be a reason. I feel like I'm grasping. But yeah, nonetheless,
maybe Amari Cooper's personal reasons bleed into the playoff game. That would be a big deal. He's not back in the building yet, so we don't know for sure. We're recording this on Monday. He may or may not be back in the building by the time this is out. But I have a hard time seeing Amari Cooper missing this game. Even that wouldn't really shake me. Honestly, you could put Josh Allen and the three hosts of the Paul Farrington show out there, and Josh Allen would just single-handedly win the game.
Yes. Josh Allen, he has that ability. Well, you just have Jack at slot, and it would get dicey for the Broncos secondary. I didn't realize Derrick Henry ended with 1,921 yards this year.
No, Derrick Henry has not gotten a lot of attention. He's had a great year. I'll say this, actually. I think of the available running backs, like the three big running backs this year, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Gibbs had the best season of any of them, even though his numbers are sort of unimpressive. Compared to them, he hasn't had the advantage of like the short touchdown situations Henry and Saquon have had. But all three of those guys have been monsters. I don't know how Derrick Henry does it. He's 31 years old, and he's putting up what in a lot of years would be. In most years, he would have run away with the rushing title.
Derrick Henry the last 3 weeks has gone for 162, 147, and 138. He's on fire right now. And that's the last thing in the world the Pittsburgh Steelers want to hear, who he did go for 162 against just a few weeks ago. The Steelers, they're reeling. They've lost what now? 5 in a row, is it? 4 in a row?
It's been a disaster.
After a really hot start to the year, Jack has even given up on Pittsburgh, who I think always has the capability of beating the Ravens. That the AFC North, as we say on this show, is just different. They're tough-nosed games. They are. They're going to be physical. It'll be a game that probably comes down to a few plays. Even that first Steeler-Raven game, there were just a couple plays there that made that look like much more of a blowout than it actually was. But again, going into Baltimore is difficult, especially when Lamar's having this MVP caliber season. He just broke Mike Vick's record for most rushing yards in league history for a quarterback. But I will say, playoff Lamar Jackson. Talk about guys with something to prove. Lamar Jackson has a chip on his shoulder coming into these playoffs. And he has the opportunity against a team that seems to have the blueprint for him most of the time they played to kind of lift that monkey off his shoulder. So are you expecting Lamar to come in, again, MVP caliber season, are you expecting him to light up this Steeler defense in Baltimore to kind of cruise into the divisional round, or do you think this could get a little dicey?
As a host of this show, I feel like it's my obligation to try and talk up the games as much as possible. In the NFC, I think we're going to get 3 really good matchups. I don't see it. I've been down on Russell Wilson all year. I am not convinced that he has what it takes to lead a playoff caliber offense. He had a chance of changing my mind after that great Bengals game. I said, if Russell Wilson keeps this up, maybe he'll change my mind. The offense has been bad since then. He was okay against the Browns, and the Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, and the Bengals game last week were all disasters offensively.
Yep.
Russell Wilson versus Lamar Jackson, I think might be the biggest quarterback mismatch in the entire playoffs. You take every matchup we're looking at, maybe for the rest of the playoffs, I don't think you're going to get a bigger difference in quality between quarterbacks than those two.
Bo Nix and Josh Allen.
I think there's a smaller gap between those two. I like Bo Nix more than Russell Wilson, and I will think Josh Allen and Lamar are pretty similar. If anything, you can give Lamar the playoff discount if you want because he struggled in the playoffs. But no, I'm serious. I think there's a huge difference between, and that's why the Ravens are 10-point favorites for this game. You don't see that a lot in the playoffs. And Lamar has just been a nightmare this season. Pairing him up with Derrick Henry, I don't understand how the NFL allowed this, right? Derrick Henry has 19 explosive plays. Najee Harris has 7 on the season. Derrick Henry has had an 87-yard run. He's been great in the passing game for them, where he's had 200 yards in the passing game, which for Derrick Henry has been good. This Ravens team is just on fire. And I worry maybe about their ability to keep up with the elite in the AFC. They've struggled with that. But this Ravens team, even in the playoffs, has not struggled at putting away bad teams. I'm sorry. I think the Steelers team is bad. I think unless TJ Watt can work his black magic and get multiple strip sack fumbles returned for touchdowns, I don't think the Steelers are even going to keep it close. And at a certain point, you have to set aside it's the AFC North factor. The Ravens are a much better team. If you just look at the teams, the Ravens are so much better than them. Even Ben Roethlisberger is coming out saying the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to get killed this weekend. I'm sorry. This just isn't the Steelers' year.
Well, think about it. Even if you do say, hey, Steelers defense might have a little more success against Lamar than other teams do, the way that the Ravens defense is trending and the Steelers offense is trending is not promising. I mean, it's a 4-game losing streak for Pittsburgh, 14.3 points per game. You watch those games, it's just ugly. Like George Pickens is throwing tantrums all over the place. Russell Wilson has 4 touchdowns over the last 4 weeks. It's not a fun offense to watch. I was with Jack out at a bar watching the Bengals game. He's like, this is who we've become. Like Chris Boswell is the only promising feature of the Steelers offense right now, and that's the special teams unit. On the other hand, after their slow start to the year, Baltimore was last in touchdowns allowed, passing touchdowns allowed, and passing yards per game. Since week 11, number 1 in total points allowed per game, total yards allowed per game. League best 171.2 passing yards, just 4 touchdowns allowed since week 11 through the year. It's been a complete transformation of that defense as well. So the more you look at this game, it's a fun rivalry, and it is AFC North, and hopefully that leads to a good game. But all the trends lead you to believe that it'll be a comfortable Baltimore win.
I'm like, look, I'm sorry, but George Pickens is the guy the Steelers really need to have an incredible game if they want to keep this close. And the way things are trending on his front, it's very hard for me. I mean, George Pickens in the middle of the game is arguing with Steelers fans on the sidelines. And Mike Tomlin, he says his usual stuff to the media, and I'm not going to say anything about that. But you've got real-time Steelers beat reporters coming out saying the Steelers should consider benching George Pickens because he's been such a problem for them behavior-wise. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to believe that he's going to lock in, focus, and kill the Ravens this game. And if anything, I think the Ravens might be able to get a 15-yard penalty out of it. I don't know. I have not been happy with how the Steelers have played this year. They had a great start. A lot of people believed in them. And maybe I'm just a Steelers hater. Maybe I just hate their brand of football. Maybe I'm too much of a numbers guy and don't understand the heart of Pittsburgh. I'm open to that. If they win this game, I will be blown away.
So will I. And the last game we'll talk about, the Texans and the Chargers. I believe that opens up the playoffs on Saturday. Fun game to open it up with Justin Herbert versus CJ Stroud. And you talk about these two teams. They're both in the playoffs, and the Texans won the division as people expected. But I don't think the seasons went exactly the way the fan bases were expecting, where the Texans were one of those teams like the Packers who were expected to take this rise, this elevation to the next level and be a Super Bowl contender this year. That hasn't been the case. The Chargers, on the other hand, Jim Harbaugh, year 1, a lot of rebuilding going on in LA. It was supposed to take at least a year. And here they are at 11-6 with the highest ranked wildcard team going to a Houston team that's really struggling to put points on the board. And the defense is there. The defense is there in Houston. But the offense has taken so many steps back, and Stephon Diggs is out for the year. Tank Dell's out. Nico Collins is amazing, but how much can he do as really the only receiver right now that's threatening? It might take a lot of Joe Mixon for the Texans to get a win here. We talked about before we started. We've had a lot of Texans fans on this show or listening to this show in the past, but I'm getting the vibe from them that it's kind of deflating. they're kind of deflated after a year where they expected a lot more. Do you see Houston being able to pull off not even pull off, but do you see Houston winning this wild card matchup and then returning to the divisional round? Same spot as last year, but just not as much hype around them.
You want to do something unbelievable?
I'd love to.
CJ Stroud has more playoff experience than Justin Herbert. CJ Stroud's played 2 games. Herbert has played 1. It was that horrific catastrophe against the Jaguars back in 2022. That's it. Amazingly, CJ Stroud has played in more playoff games. And I think this Texans team is sliding in under the radar. You're right. They were the most hyped team in the NFL going into the season. I don't mean people predict them to be the best, but they had the most hype surrounding them. People were expecting a huge step forwards for CJ Stroud in the offense, and it just didn't quite come. Last year, I think, was sort of a miraculous year for them. It might be a while before they get that kind of magic. But despite the injuries, the Texans are 10-7. They won their division. They've played a fair amount of good football. And as long as you've got CJ Stroud throwing to Nico Collins, I think this team has an opportunity to win the game. The Chargers and Houston have both been very excellent on turnover differential this year. And I think the Texans defense, even though it hasn't gotten nearly as much hype as it got last year, there's so many effective young players on that defense. I think he can step up in big moments, right? Everybody talks about Will Anderson. He's obviously a huge threat, but there's lots of other players too on this team. So as I'm looking at this, I mean, Derek Stingley has had a pretty good year. Actually, Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter both. They are the best cornerback duo in passer rating in the NFL this season. They've had an incredible year, and I feel like it hasn't gotten a lot of attention because a lot of the hype has been sucked out of Houston. You talk about teams and curses. This is the Los Angeles Chargers in the best season they've had in a long time, going into the playoffs to play a disappointing Houston team on the road. I love the Texans as home dogs.
Yeah, I want to be careful about... I want to be a little careful when we're saying Houston's disappointing because the defense really has been...
disappointing relative to the hype.
Yeah,
that's
sure,
all I mean.
sure.
They came in, people were expecting them to go 13-plus wins, be contenders for the 1 seed.
Yes. Okay, yeah, fair. I'm with you there. To me, it's going to be a defensive showdown, I think. I'd be very surprised if I looked up at this game and it was like 31-28 or something, just with the way these defenses have played this year and the way the offenses have played this year. But I think I'm with you. I'm picking Houston. Maybe it's not going to be as much of a blowout as you're thinking, but that defense, if you just look across the board, top 10 yards allowed per game, 11 rushing touchdowns allowed. That's 5th best, 83.7 passer rating, 3rd best. Like statistically speaking, and when you watch them play, it's been a very good Houston defense. And I think CJ Stroud and Nico Collins and Mixon is just enough. I mean, even with just Nico Collins there, I probably like Nico Collins more than the entire LA receiving depth chart there, even though Ladd McConkey has been coming on. So I'm going to go with Houston as well. I think they have a little more firepower on offense and a little bit better defense, despite the Chargers being number 1 overall in points allowed this year. So I got Houston in a close one, but maybe not exactly a fun game to watch, but a defensive showdown.
Yeah, keep an eye this game on John Mechie. I think he has a potential of a big game for the Texans. Nico Collins is going to draw all the attention. But, the Texans team, I think more than most teams in the NFL, is set up to take these kinds of injuries. Mechie can obviously generate some big plays. Like Bobby Trees and Dalton Schultz are both solid, sure-handed players, right? Those are guys that you can count on to come down with the ball when you need it, that can run routes, that have been here before and done that. I don't know. I understand why the Chargers are favorites. They've got the better quarterback. They've got the better coach. They've got an exciting team. But I really like the Texans playing at home here. I think the fans are going to show up, and I think they're going to take care of business.
I'm trying to think here before we wrap it up. If I had to rank my most confident to least confident pick of this weekend, forget about the spread. I think I'm going Buffalo 1, right? The Bills would be my most confident pick. Then I'll go Baltimore 2 against the Steelers. I think I lean the Eagles actually at 3 over the Packers. I might lean Eagles at 3. Then I'd go Texans, Vikings. I should put the Vikings there probably. I'll go No. I'll go Vikings, then I'll go Texans, then I'll go Bucks. Does that sound about right?
I've got a pretty different list.
What do you have?
The top two are similar. I've got the Ravens at 1 and the Bills at 2. So I think you have to pick those two.
They're 1 and 2. The rest are all very, very close.
Yeah, it's at number 3, actually. I've got the Commanders. I really think this Commanders team is going to go into Tampa Bay and beat the Buccaneers. At number 4, I've got the Vikings. At number 5, I've got the Texans. And at number 6, I've got the Eagles. I know, again, Packers fans are going to come in here and say I'm pandering. I'm not. I really think I've got this Eagles team on upset watch. Jalen Hurts coming back after a concussion with Jordan Love pissed off doesn't sound like I would not want to be the Eagles this game. I'd much rather play a different team. I'd rather be hosting the Commanders or whatever. I'd
be pretty surprised to see the Packers win this one. Even though I believe they have the ability to. Again, there's a line after Buffalo and Baltimore from like shocked to like, oh wow, like the Packers won. I would still I think Philly, gosh, that would be a horrible loss for Philly. I think they really have Super Bowl in their mind. All right, so
horrible losses happen. One team has a horrible loss every year in the playoffs.
Yep. It happens. It'll happen multiple times in this playoff. No matter what, there'll be some horrible losses. So, all right, we'll wrap it up there. An NFL playoff wild card preview. Ziggy, thanks for hopping on, and we'll be back with. So I'm going to the Orange Bowl to see Notre Dame and Penn State this week.
To see Notre Dame crush
Penn State this week.
That's my number one most confidence.
Me too. Number one. So we'll probably, this will be it for new material coming out this week, unless if Ziggy decides to go rogue and post a video. You never know with Ziggy. But otherwise, we'll be back either Saturday or Sunday with some reaction content to the playoffs.
Yeah, this will be our last preview material for the week, but this will not be. We're going to be going hard this weekend because it's the playoffs.
It's here. All right. We'll see you soon. Thanks for listening.